Now, as you might know, I've been looking for a replacement for the 10-watt xTool D1 for a while, and I found it. It's called the 20-watt xTool D1 Pro, and it's sitting over there. I use it quite often in my shop, and it has been working flawlessly. This, however, is a new laser. This is the Atezr P20 20-watt laser from a company that came out of nowhere and built this. This is gorgeous. It's well built. It has features that you won't find on an xTool D1 Pro. So is it better? Stick around and find out. Hey, Steve here, and welcome back to my workshop. Now, as I mentioned, I'm looking for a new champion, a diode laser that can dethrone the xTool D1 Pro. And I came across this one. This is the Atezr P20. They reached out to me and said, we've got what we think is a D1 Pro killer. Would you like to give it a try? And of course, anybody who's gonna tempt me with that bait, I'm gonna bite. So they sent it along, and I put it together last week, and I've really been pushing it since then. And in this video, I want to show you certainly the high-level details. We'll do a flyover, talk about some of the specs of this P20, and show you some output quickly, and come up with some results at the end, a summary, and both things that I think they did really well here, maybe better than the D1 Pro, as well as things I think that they could still work on to improve, and at the end come up with a score and make a recommendation on whether I think this one's better than the D1 Pro or not. Now, make no mistake, the D1 Pro is a fantastic laser. If you have one, you are certainly not going to be disappointed, but I want to find out if I'm going to be disappointed with something like this as well. So with that, we can get rolling here, and we'll start with a flyover. So I'll put the specs up here while I do a flyover. And we'll start with the laser module. It's a 455 nanometer plus or minus, of course, laser module at 20 to 24 watts spec'd. By comparison, the xTool is 20 watts. And the spot size here is actually substantially smaller. It's 0.08 millimeters by 0.06 millimeters. Contrast that to the xTool is 0.08 by 0.1. So it's a rectangular, just like the xTool, but the largest dimension is actually the horizontal, not the vertical. So it's incredibly small, actually. The beam size here. Both the xTool and the Atezr P20 are 400 millimeters per second maximum speed. Now, both lasers have limit switches. In the case of the Atezr, rather than optical, they're mechanical switches. Some people like those better than optical. From a construction standpoint, I find them on the Atezr P20 to be a little more robust. The optical sensors on the D1 seem to be a little frail. I actually had to replace one before I could do the review on it, which broke during shipping. Both have standard 32-bit controllers, all the same kinds of inputs, USB, Wi-Fi, and an SD card for loading. Now, from a standpoint of software, the Atezr P20 can do light burn as well as laser Gerbil, of course. However, on the xTool, in addition to those two, you can also use the xTool Creative Space software, which is actually really nice software. If you have an xTool, you should be using it for a lot of things at least. Now, there are rumors that Atezr is working on a piece of software as well, separate from Lightburn. Now, on the extra side, the Atezr P20, over and above what the D1 provides, also comes with that air assist pump in the box, and it has that nice touch-sensitive display that you can detach and control your laser by hand. That's more appropriate if you're using the SD card rather than any connection direct to your computer. And those are the specs. Now, the laser itself, all the extrusion around the outside is aluminum, and in fact, there's very little plastic anywhere on this laser. It's very similar in construction to the D1, actually. So you won't find a dramatic difference between the two. Now, one place you will find a difference is the cable handling for the gantry. On the Atezr P20, they did a fantastic job of keeping that cable out of the way as the gantry is moving forward and backward in the laser. The xTool, on the D1 Pro, they improved it quite a bit over the D1, but there's still that dangling cable, and I know there's limitations on what you can do with it, but here they actually seem to solve that problem. Now, by contrast, the cables for USB, they didn't really handle that very well. The power, they stuck them on top of the controller, and they're sitting right in front of the laser, and they will get in your way, and you'll curse it. We are in, the almost 2023, and laser companies have been making these lasers for quite a while. You think by now that they would have moved these cables out of the way, and Atezr's not unique here. Lots of laser companies do this, but it drives me nuts. So there you go. There's the laser. And, where appropriate here, I compared it to the xTool D1 because if you're in the market here, you're going to be looking at both of these lasers. They're similar size, similar price. The P20 on the workspace size is actually a bit bigger. It's 430 millimeters square. Compared to the xTool D1 Pro, the workspace size on the 20 watt at least is 430 millimeters wide, just like the P20, but it's only 390 millimeters in the other direction. So a little bit smaller, and for some people that will make a difference if you're making larger items, or you're trying to make items that are symmetrical. If your maximum width is 430, you also want the height to be 430. So a bit different there, but nothing substantial. All right, now let's take a look at where it really matters, the output, of course. So I did a standard gradient test. This is the xTool D1 Pro, and using the same exact settings. Here's the Atezr P20. Now you will notice that on the 10% side, once you get the speed really rolling here beyond sort of 5,400 millimeters per second, it starts to kind of wane. There's just not enough power to make it turn on at that speed, and that proceeds up into the 20s. So a little bit different than the low end of the D1 Pro. D1 Pro is probably a little bit better in that regard, but when you look at the power output, they're at the higher end here, there's a lot more power. Even the lettering you can see here, it's very nice, crisp and clear, and here it just seems to be a little bit overpowered. So a little more power, certainly overall, but the bottom end is a little bit lower. Nothing to panic about. I, of course, did some general rudimentary tests, the standard tests that they brought with their laser. I did a cut of 1/4-inch plywood, and cut very nicely. You can see along the edges here, it's very crisp. And just for fun, I took the exact same image and cut it in paper. And again, no burning if you get the settings right. It just works out perfectly. Now I did some engraving, and I started with my standard dog image, and I had to play around with it a bit. And it started out too light, then it was too dark, and then I brightened it up, and finally I got to one here that was actually pretty decent. Now, the one thing I'll point out here is you'll notice that the alignment of all of these, as much as I was trying to get it right, is kind of all over the place. And that's because this laser doesn't have any kind of sighting dot like the xTool D1 Pro does. That may bother some people. I did have a bit of a challenge here getting things lined up, as you can see, even though I was trying. But we can talk about that in the end here. Once I got the settings right, I did a lighthouse on cherry. The rock striations here came out really nice. Again, these are grayscales. They're not anything like Stucky or Jarvis rendering. So it came out quite nice. All of the dark lines here are the green and the cherry, of course. And then just for fun, I was at the beach the other day and I picked up a nice rock, and I thought it would be nice to try this on the laser. Came out not too bad. Unlike a CO2 laser, you can hit this pretty much with as much power as you want from the diode laser, and it will never actually burn. By comparison, on a CO2, this would tend to melt the surface of the rock, and you'd potentially get some darkening or some bubbling there. So Not quite as nice as a CO2 in a lot of ways, but in some ways it's actually better. I like how it actually did the engraving here. So if you're on a beach on the East Coast and you find this rock, you'll know it was from me, because I'm going to actually throw this one back on the beach. Anyway, those are the results, and they look quite nice. Okay, so where does that leave us? Well, you saw the output here, and it looks great. Particularly the gradient test showed that the higher end of this laser has a lot more power than the D1 Pro. Lower end, maybe not quite as good. So if you're doing grayscale imaging, you may have to do a little bit more work. You saw that I did it. I really didn't change too much. All I did was set the low end of the grayscale to 13% rather than 10% like I did on the D1 Pro, and everything came out comparable. On the pros and cons, things I really like about this laser: the feature set is great. It's nice that it comes with an air assist pump in the box. You don't have to go and spend another $135 to get one, like you do on the D1 Pro. The work area is larger than the D1. It's 430 by 430 square, which is nice. And one of the best features here that I didn't talk about here, but I did talk about it in the video I did when I created the checkerboard, is this laser allows you direct access to the Gerbil parameters. So if you want to calibrate your laser and get kind of hyper accuracy, you can actually calibrate it here properly like you would expect. By contrast, the D1 Pro doesn't let you do that, and you saw in that video, and if you haven't seen it, click up in the corner here and go watch it. I had serious trouble trying to work around that limitation, and that alone, if you're looking for hyper accuracy and you want to calibrate your laser, you might choose this one over the D1 Pro. Next on the list here is very well built. It's all metal, just like the D1. It doesn't use metal rollers, however. Not that that's a huge problem, because I didn't have any problems here with the Teflon wheels, but time will tell in the longer term whether you could use this laser in a sort of high volume business application. All right, and last on the Pro side here, there's lots of power. You saw the gradient test, and the P20 at the higher end was definitely engraving deeper and darker than the xTool D1 Pro, and that's because they spec the laser module at top end of 20 to 24 watts versus 20 on the D1 Pro, and clearly it does have more power, and you may want that if you're doing a lot of cutting. Now on the con side, there were a few things I think that they could have done better. I mentioned when I was doing the dog photos, I was actively trying to align those photos, and you could see the output there. They were all over the place. And that's because there's no way to accurately sight this laser in. There's no red cross like there is on a D1 Pro or a red dot. And that will matter. I think you can probably get used to it, but it's a bit of a challenge. It shouldn't happen, honestly. So hopefully future versions of this laser have some kind of sighting mechanism. Now there is that clear window on the front of the laser, which in theory you should be able to see the actual laser through. In practice, that glass on the front is so dark and so shiny that you really can't see anything, so you can't count on using that for alignment. And I've seen lots of people who just punch that out of there and just buy into the fact that they're going to wear goggles when they use this laser in favor of getting the alignment right. I mentioned the dangling cables on the front. Those things drive me crazy, and the Atezr is not alone here. Definitely lots of lasers still do this, and we've been making lasers for a long time, and I can't believe that we're still hanging cables in front of the laser where a user actually has to push buttons and do things. So, it's not a showstopper, but it is annoying. And last thing on the list here, I didn't talk about in line in the video. This laser is actually a bit loud. As soon as you turn it on, the fan in the laser module comes on, and it's quite loud. By contrast, the D1 Pro, the laser fan stays off until you're actually using the laser. And hopefully Atezr can maybe do a software update to control that fan so that when it's just sitting idle, it's quiet. Anyway, those are the pros and cons. Nothing here is a showstopper. There's definitely things you will like a lot in this laser, and there are things that a D1 owner will look at and go, why is this happening? This is not good. I don't think either the Atezr P20 or the D1 Pro is a clear leader. They're both very solid lasers, and I would certainly recommend either of them. All right, we can summarize here. So should you buy one of these? Definitely if you're in the market for a laser that costs north of $1,000, you're already looking at the D1 Pro 20 watt. You should also realistically look at this laser. It's a very solid laser. It operates, I would say, more smoothly than a D1 Pro. There's fewer gotchas when you're trying to get things running. It works completely with light burn or laser Gerbil rather than trying to find hacks and workarounds that are built into things like the D1 Pro. And it's just a great laser. And if you don't believe me, then if you don't watch Louisiana hobby guy Rich over there, he has done also a video on this laser, and he did a great job. And he rarely recommends hardware, and he recommended this laser, and I will second his voice. I will also recommend this laser. It's very solid. So if you are looking for a laser, you might want to consider this one. And if you are, I put an affiliate link down below. And there's also some discounts going on right now with Black Friday happening in the near future. And you can take advantage of those as well. And if you do use the affiliate link, you're helping out the channel, and that I will give you unending thanks for. All right, and with that, we'll shut down. As always, I'll put a video up in the corner that I think you might be interested in, so go watch that, and I'll see you over there. Otherwise, get out there and make your world. And if you're struggling and you need a more powerful laser, you might want to consider the Atezr P20. And I'll see you next time.